Thank you both for coming in. The Columbian is pleased to welcome candidates for State Treasurer, Dwayne Davidson and Michael Waite. And I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor. And just so you know, we are videotaping this. We'll post it unedited on our website for the benefit of our readers, as we do with all of our editorial board meetings. And with that, we'll get started. We'll begin with introductions. Take 1 to 2 minutes, introduce yourselves, give a little bit of your background, explain why you're running for this office, and then after that we'll move on to some policy questions. And we'll start with Dwayne.
Okay. My name is Dwayne Davidson. I'm the Benton County Treasurer. I've been Benton County Treasurer I'm in my 4th term. I was originally from Western Washington, grew up in the town of Carnation, which is in the Snoqualmie Valley, due east of Seattle. Grew up in a dairy farm and logging family. It was pretty obvious to me when I was growing up that way of life was ceasing to exist, small farms like that, and so I would have to do something else. And so after giving it a try a little bit, I went to Central Washington University. I got my bachelor's degree in accounting, met my wife, who was an Eastern Washingtonian, so that kind of sealed the rest of my time in Eastern Washington. I went to work for a CPA firm, and then after being with a CPA firm for a while, went to work for Benton County with the state auditor's office. With the state auditor's office. Was an assistant audit manager, moved up to assistant audit manager, audited public entities from the Idaho border and all the way to Yakima, kind of that region. Entities such as WSU and all small little county entities and big ones like Whoops at the time. Now it's Energy Northwest. Then I went to work for Benton County as the chief financial officer, and an opening came up where treasurer was in a lot of hot water. Our county treasurer had a vote of non-confidence in him given by the commissioners. They were having a lot of issues with the financials. I thought, well, with the background being a CPA and a state auditor, maybe I can turn the office around, and maybe that would be enough of a selling point to run. So I jumped in the race, had 2 opponents. It was a pretty good little local election, and a lot of campaigning involved with that. But almost was kind of surprised I won, and I've had clean audits ever since. So got the office kind of turned around, and probably elaborate on some more of the things we did later. But that's kind of my background, short little bio.
Great, thank you. Michael?
And the question, just sorry.
Give us a little background and why you're running for state treasurer.
Sure. So background, born in Australia, came to the United States in 1995. I was on the professional tennis tour at the time. When that journey finished, went to college here in the United States, received my undergraduate degree in accounting and organizational behavior, went on, worked in accounting, corporate accounting, financial analysis, then went on and did my MBA at Emory University, and from there rose up to be chief financial officer of a mid-sized firm, about $1.2 billion under management in Atlanta, Georgia, and about 400 people. And then after that, I met my wife, and her job brought us out to Washington State. So she came out for residency. She's a pediatrician with Seattle Children's Hospital. And and in the time since I've been here, I was worked for Cascade Investment, which is Bill and Melinda Gates' investment company. I was there for 4 years, the last 2 as head of accounting for over $70 billion. And then most recently I joined Bentall Kennedy in 2012, and I've been there since. Currently serve as Senior Vice President of Operations. We're an institutional investment advisor, manage a little over $11 billion here in the United States. So that's my career background. Why I'm running? 2 main reasons. One, came from a country town, small country town in Australia, 5,000 people, rural town. Mum and Dad still live there in the same house. And Mum was a town councillor and Grandpa was a town councillor. And he had actually been mayor before I was born. And once you're mayor, you're always mayor whether you're in the seat or not. So I grew up with the dinner table conversation being local politics and the importance of public service. And so I had always wanted to serve in a public office. And then why now? This is definitely earlier than I'd planned on it. I was finishing up on the board of United Way of King County and Rob McKenna was on that board. So we served together there, got to know him, took him out, frankly went to lunch and said, look, I'm looking for different public service opportunities. What do you think? And this was one of a couple of ideas we discussed. And from there he said, look, I'd like to help you. And he opened a lot of doors. I love the finance, that's obviously what I do, but I didn't have a political network to embrace a statewide campaign. But here we are. That was a little over a year ago. And we've been running, Dwayne and I have been running since January, and here we are. So it's been a great journey.
So is Rob McKenna endorsing you?
Yeah, Rob's formally endorsed, but frankly, more than that, the mentorship's been incredible. He's been with me every step of the way. Spoke to him 2 days ago just to get advice and counsel, because this is as you're well aware from your positions, politics is a different animal. So, campaigning specifically, the job itself. Obviously, this is a big finance job, but it's been an incredible experience.
And you mentioned you've been through this campaigning journey and much of it together. I assume by now you're pretty familiar with each other.
We can do the stories together.
You've heard, you're both Republicans, which is a historic situation in the state. But given all of that, what are the differences that you have found between how you would approach the job, Dwayne?
Oh, they're pretty profound. We can talk about that. I've told a couple editorial boards that I bet that you could go back in history and you could probably find some Democrats and Republicans that ran against each other were probably more similar in many ways than Michael and I approach this office. Having been if I can just elaborate a little bit more, I never really touched on why I jumped into the race. Kind of gave a bio and just to make that a little bit more complete. When the present treasurer decided to retire, I got a call from a firm that represented several elected officials that knew that I had been for 3 terms the president of the Washington State Association of County Treasurers. And I spent a lot of time in Olympia on different legislative issues. Been very, very involved at the state level. Got several bills that benefited county operations and taxpayers through the legislature. Did testifying to the legislature and all that. And so they said, they pulled me back to Tacoma. I met with Sam Reed, who was one of the first people to endorse my campaign, and then Dan Evans, former governor, who endorsed my campaign, Kim Wyman, and then most importantly, I got all of the elected partisan treasurers, both Republican and Democrat county treasurers in the entire state, to endorse me. And that kind of when they said, I said, okay, count me in. I had to convince my wife to move to Olympia. But that's when I decided to jump in. That background of representing taking the bipartisan approach of everything that we do starts to lead to describe a little bit of maybe some of the differences that we have. I look at the treasurer's role at the state very similar to how the treasurer's role is at the county. As the county, you're basically administrator of the county funds. You basically administer cash flow and banking. You monitor and issue debt and make the bond payments and then investments. Maintain the investments for the county. It's extremely similar, by design, by the Constitution at the state level. One of the things that as president of the Association of County Treasurers, one of the things that kind of got in my craw a little bit is that the present state treasurer was very active in promoting some legislation. And that was kind of not of the norm. I mean, that's not really what state treasurers have done in the past. Mike Murphy, Robert O'Brien before him, they took a lot more of an administrative approach to the office, staying independent and neutral. Basically, they were elected on a partisan label, but once they got in office, they acted as nonpartisan as you probably could. And most of our statewide officials, we expect that. We expect that with Kim Wyman, and when she administers elections, to be the same way, or any Secretary of State for that matter. So That's really where the big difference that there is in between Michael and I is that I'll let him speak for himself, but he takes a lot stronger view of being an advocate for what he sees as good financial prudent management. I think that there's enough of that goes on. First of all, I don't think it's the role of the office to do that, and there's reasons why, and it was pretty disruptive, I thought, to the legislative process. It's about as critical as I get of Mr. McIntyre. There's only a couple things that he did that, kind of, for the most part, I think he was a pretty good treasurer. I really admired how when there was a financial crisis and kind of a meltdown, some of our bankings back in 1989, he took us to the 100% collateralization. There was a few banks failed. One of them was actually right in your neck of the woods here, and he took us to the 100% collateralization rule to protect state funds, and the same rule was put down into the county levels too. And so I think from some ways he's been a pretty good treasurer. The fact that he has made the treasurer's office a little bit more active in legislation. The one bill that he's pushed, there's been several, but the one bill that we all know that he pushed really big was the state income tax, and I just don't think that that's the role of the state treasurer. Much like as county treasurer, I don't pretend to be a commissioner. I stay out of the commission business. I'm there to advise and counsel when they come to me with financial matters, but don't basically do press releases and throw the gauntlet down to try to get them to do, one thing or the other.
Michael, would you agree? Is that a difference between the two of you?
I think the differences are the following. Two things. Experience, the right experience. And second, the role of a strategic advisor. So, first one is experience. My experience is obviously in the billions. I know and I appreciate that a county bureaucrat or a county official thinks that it's just moving a decimal place or 3 or 4. But when you sit on the other side of those numbers and actually run financial statements in the billions, as Gates 70 plus billion and that, it's not. It takes significantly different expertise, vendors, skills, and experience, and you get significantly different experience in that role. So that experience will enable me to run the office, not just administer the office, and set that tone from the staff at the State Investment Board, where we have $106 billion of assets under management. We spent $333 million on external consultants last year. Now, should it be zero? Absolutely not. But $333 million, there's a lot of room in there for a finance professional to actually make a difference about how much money is being spent of taxpayer dollars in advising us.
Let me interrupt for
Yeah,
a second.
sure.
By constitution or statute, what is the role? What role is the treasurer supposed to play with the state investment?
So you're on the board of the State
Okay.
Investment Board, and you're the highest elected official.
Okay.
So, I mean, there is no... So that in itself is incumbent on a very high responsibility. And meeting with legislators is one of the key things they want me to do. And all the ones that have endorsed me, from Senator Andy Hill and a number of others that we have. And it's that expertise that I bring to the table from day one. And so that experience is a clear differentiator. The second is strategic advice. I do want to be the taxpayer advocate. I think it's appropriate that the chief financial officer of the state, the highest elected official in finance in the state, has a voice to help. Now, I've been a chief financial officer in firms. I'm head of client finance for Bentel Kennedy, now senior vice president of operations. My clients don't look at it as partisan when you provide excellent financial advice. It's not always agreed to, and that's okay, and they don't always accept it, and that's okay too. But as a client, which the legislature, the governor, the community, newspapers, our clients of financial advice, you deserve to get the best financial advice. And that's beyond just transparency, because you don't need another report coming out of Olympia. You need actionable sources of the money, uses of the money, and results. And those three things do not form part of the reporting that you get out of Olympia. That's what you deserve. That's what my clients have always expected. And that's what I look forward to doing from within the office, providing strategic advice. And I think, frankly, Washington State deserves it. They've never had this choice. This office has been held for decades by local county administrators and bureaucrats and politicians, and they've never been a choice. And now they actually have one this year.
Let me try to. I don't know how many people really understand what the heck you guys do.
No.
I mean,
We traveled.
You guys and the auditors, who knows what you guys are doing?
Yeah.
And plus, we can't ask you, what you think about the taxes or payroll, or Carrie Leary or school budgets. So you're an odd bunch, I think, for the average voter. And so it's tough, I think, difficult for voters to have an appreciation of this particular office. If I tried to break this down, is it fair to say that the treasurer, I mean, you don't just take in the pile of money that you guys get and you throw it over into a bank account and you're done. You advise on how that money should be, or where that money should be put in order to gain interest on the pile of money that you guys get. And then you have to balance where you place this money between safety and return. Not too much different than what the average homeowner would have to do if they've got a few extra bucks and they're trying to figure out how to get the biggest bang for their buck without losing it all. So I think that's a fair assessment of what you're doing. And so there is always this balancing act between safety versus return.
Yeah.
You want to get the highest return that you can possibly get without you looking like an idiot.
That's right.
And losing a bunch. With that in mind, I'm going to ask who thinks can do this the best, and we're both going to say you're both going to say yourselves. But all right, so who's going to do the best with that? And at the end of the day, who's going to get the bigger bang for their buck? Who's going to make the best investment to get the best return for the taxpayers, and why? Want to start?
Sure. Yeah, it's going. The criteria that you use to decide who's going to do the best job is going to be crucial in how we come up to that. Because I totally agree with you. What's important when it comes to investments is the safety and then the liquidity, which means that when the cash is immediately needed, the bills need to be paid, that you don't have to mature an investment early or something like that to get those money. So those two. And then that's another difference where Michael and I take a much more conservative approach that yield is a far third. And that's how I do I conduct the county's investment pool. Let me just elaborate a little bit. When I did about 4 or 5 years ago, I was dismayed a little bit about the low interest rates that was coming out of the state, of the funds that we had at the state treasurer's office, because that's an option of ours, is to invest at the state. So I went and using present statutes, the same statutes that the state treasurer organizes their pool under, combined all of the special purpose districts with their permission, school districts, fire districts and such, to combine all their funds together. And even little, Sagebrush County, Benton County, when we were able to do that, it came up to about 250 plus $1 million. That gave us a lot better position in the marketplace to achieve a little bit better yield. But that doesn't mean that the state's doing a bad job of it. It just allowed us, it kind of gave us like the hometown bank has, that hometown advantage, that we're able to gauge their cash flow a little bit better than the state would be able to, because quite frankly, I'm driving by the construction projects on the way to work as they're taking place. So you're able to judge that. So to answer your question, who's going to be able to do the better job? I don't invest funds to try to achieve the highest yield when you start compromising the safety and liquidity. I believe that when it says, what kind of risk, I'm very risk adverse because the public has no tolerance for loss of public funds in an investment game. And so I think that generally speaking, if we...
Although it's likely to be less a loss of funds and more likely to be I'm not getting quite as much as I would have otherwise.
Right.
Correct.
I
It's
mean,
an
if you guys ever
underperformance.
actually lost money, you'd last a day and then you're
Exactly.
So we're not talking
That's
about
right.
the end of losing. We're talking about in order to better assure that I never get into that spot, I am going to be less risk adverse. And I think you're saying you're going to be less risk adverse than Michael.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
How do you assess this?
yeah, the problem is government massively underperforms in this area. There's no doubt that daily cash needs to be safe and secure and liquid to manage to just not have a liquidity problem with paying bills. That's just block and tackle. Every client's the same. I've never seen a client, a small business, a non-profit that I've worked with that flirts with that without being in duress, frankly. So there's no difference there. I think my private industry experience chasing yield for even overnight accounts that are totally safe and secure, but getting the best results, knowing how to do it at the scale and the caliber that clients like Bill Gates and others expect, has tremendous advantages for the state. And I will do that from this office. But more importantly, $106 billion of investments under management. That is something no local administrator has ever had the experience of doing. And your point is precise, which is, if you're going to underperform the market or underperform a benchmark, you should communicate that clearly up front before the year starts and say, we're going to deliver more safety, and we're going to underperform, because if you underperform by 1%, that's $1 billion you're leaving on the table, right? So instead of growing 7%, you might grow 6%. And if you want to communicate, you need to communicate that up front to taxpayers. And we deserve that as citizens to say, and then show us how we're safer. Because just leaving $1 billion and then underperforming and just saying, we're doing it just because, but you should feel safer about it, is no longer acceptable. And I expect to be held to a higher standard. And if I perform the same way for a private client, like they do in this government, in underperforming, I would be fired. And that is the problem with why we need to change. It's why an office like the State Treasurer's Office is so perfect for a chief financial officer of my caliber, of my experience, to actually deliver returns, save money, in terms of not spend as much money running it, but also communicate what that differential is.
So let's just assume for the sake of argument that you were the treasurer for the last year, the state
Okay.
treasurer for the last year. How much more money would we have in the bucket if you already had a year under your belt and we have?
I don't know. I can't tell from the outside, but there's two ways I think that we would have made more. From an exact dollar number, it's hard to say.
Well,
But
how about a general number? I
Well-
don't need an exact number.
Well, I think
you talked about the 6 and
yeah, I
7%
think-
of what that would yield.
yeah,
I mean,
that's
do you
right.
think you would have been able to obtain an extra
Well, every
percent more?
every 1 basis point is $10 million. So is it 5 basis points? Is it 10 basis points? That's
You don't know?
I can't tell from the outside because I'm not in the
Oh.
meetings pushing what the caliber of the analysis is and what
Do
the
you know
caliber
what
of the
they've
investment is.
invested in?
You can see a lot of it.
Yeah.
But again, it is specific about what is their long range forecast. How are they moving efficiently? The fact that they're spending $333 million in external consultants last year gives me pause because I know the competitiveness of where that cost structure should be. That would tell me that there's tens of millions of dollars to be gained on that side of the equation. So whichever way you look at it, it's a two-sided coin, and you can have tremendous impact. Now you've got to ask yourself, what is the incentive of running this as efficiently and as safely and efficiently as it is in private industry, where you're pushing to get that every saving in the cost structure and pushing to get balanced risk and return, safe risk return on the income side. So is it tens of millions of dollars? Absolutely. Is it hundreds of millions of dollars? Quite likely. And I'm happy to be held accountable for that in the first year of office when I actually have the chance to make the impact. And I'll be welcoming. And you won't have to come and ask me. I will be providing analysis that shows how it's going quickly, concisely, and something that you can actually read. I mean, look at the county treasurers. You can't find anywhere in this state where you can go 39 counties, 1, 3, 5, 10-year returns, cost of carrying the capital, just the basic stuff that you would never go a day without having just that one pager to compare and where you would sit county-wide, doesn't exist. And why is that? That's a crucial part of performance with taxpayer dollars.
Dwayne, a couple of times he's mentioned the $333 million on external consultant fees. Would you agree that's excessive for the state? And I know you had nothing to do with it, but
No,
do you think that would be excessive?
No, I would not make. I have not looked at that issue at all.
Okay.
With the amount of money that they manage and everything else like that, I wouldn't even attempt to make a judgment call on that one. We could take a look at it, but
See, that's a great example of the difference in experience. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that they are subject to a very competitive nature in their awarding their contracts and stuff. So I'm not going to be quick to just assume that that's all been the treasurer's office is an excessive contracts. I mean, if I had to just make a snap judgment, I would probably say they're not, because they've gone through a competitive bid type of process to get there. I know it might be, nice to try to grab attention to people to say, by God, that sounds like a lot of money, and maybe that's excessive, and we better go take a look at it. Well, yeah, of course, if I got elected, I would look at it just like all the public contracts I do at the county level. We would scrutinize all of them when they came up, and we'd get the best deal possible. I'm not going to make a judgment call on without investigating further of the prior administrations. He's on his way out right now, and we'll take a look at those contracts when they renew.
well, he just touched the exact approach that I want to change. It's the renewal. It's just so automatic in government. The question is, do you need $333 million? Why just wait for renewal? It's just like baseline budgeting, right? It's just grab it, save as, and keep going. And you can competitively bid it if it's not needed in the first place because you have the experience to run the office or have the experience to be like, that was a vendor that no longer provides value to us, but we just want to have it on the available anyway. I know the passion with which to serve clients, and taxpayers deserve this same intensity to protect the dollars.
And have you looked specifically at that $333 million?
To the
How
extent
excessive
to the
is-
extent that I can. And like I said, is it tens of millions? Yes. Is it beyond that? I mean, it's not zero. We all know the state needs and deserves good financial advice, and absolutely appropriate. But there's a lot of room between 0 and 333 million. And I've had fortunate experiences. We do benchmark to our peers in private industry, and we're consistently looking at how the cost of us running our money versus the cost of others with publicly available information. It's limited, but it's enough to know well and truly that you wouldn't be taking the position if you had the experience that I have of saying 333 million. That's a reasonable number. It's outside of the bandwidth of reasonable.
Now let's talk about the state debt right now. I know in some of your campaign materials you've said that it's excessive. One is, isn't that the role of the legislature and the governor?
Yeah.
Don't they determine that,
Absolutely.
or should it be up to the treasurer to deal with that?
No, you're right, but on both fronts, it's yes and yes. The treasurer should help. Because I would guess if you have a chief financial officer here or at any firm, they probably didn't make the ultimate decision to put debt on it or not. It's usually the chief executive officer or the board. There's approval, but the chief financial officer is looked for two things: advice, options, and then executing it effectively. Okay? Is that a fair summary? And therefore, I do have a concern. I think there's two areas here. One is the analysis. And this is something I've been talking to legislators about. They're excited to have me help on this. What is the amount of debt our state should have? Again, not zero, but we sit today at $20 billion of state debt, 6th highest per person in the country. Now, is that for a state performing, frankly, as well as we are? Is that the debt we wanted to have? Is that the debt we should have? Is that level of debt and borrowing? $2 billion of this year's budget is going to Wall Street on debt payments. Again, there's been no strategic discussion or decision about, there's not one specific number, but there's a band, right? From the office, that's what I'll help lead that conversation. Because if not the treasurer, who? Who else can the legislature actually look to? Because it hasn't happened. And I haven't found anyone that says we're strategically aiming at this level of debt to serve the citizens of Washington. And that is an appropriate discussion, and that is an appropriate for this office to do. Now, will the legislature act on it to the penny? No, not. But will they use it as part of the guidance, as thinking about future decisions? And can the community and the media and others use that information, that knowledge, to help hold people accountable and to get better results and to enable better service to be achieved during downturns? Because that's when you get into trouble. We all know the burden of debt doesn't go away with a recession, and we need to do better. And so that's an example of the balance between financial advice and actually, I'm not a legislator, and I don't want to be a legislator, but I want to help, and I think Washington state citizens finally deserve that type of advice coming from the Treasurer's office, and that type of helpful, actionable advice that the legislator can actually make decisions based on or influence their decisions.
Dwayne, is the state debt excessive?
I think that this all debt should be looked at in a negative type of view. I mean, debt costs money to have, and it's not in the numbers, of course, that ever impresses Michael. But the Benton County had a general obligation debt when I came to office of over $30 million, and by traveling down to San Francisco on a couple different occasions, and arguing for better bond ratings for not only school districts but Benton County, and was able to get upgrades through Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch. We were able to save on, we were able to refinance the debt, and now debt is 40% of what it was when I came to office. Did I just do all that magic? No. I mean, I'm just the treasurer's office. I went down there, I did my part as a team leader, but it took the commission, just like you said, it's primarily the legislature's responsibility, and at the county level, it was primarily the commissioner's responsibility to allow that to happen. I was right there as a team player all the way. I was the one that made the trips for the bond ratings. I was there as their advisor, trying to get them to take a look at our debt, and we did. It takes team. It takes a team approach, but ultimately the decision is the legislature. The voters are holding them responsible for that. I think that the legislators ought to be informed about what the debt is. If continued issuance of debt might possibly be threatening the rating of the state, all that is, of course, information that they need to have. But to answer your question, debt is always a concern. We should never really just willy-nilly issue debt, because the debt service is just getting to be too high. But ultimately, I think that the role of the treasurer is a team player in this, and I wonder sometimes about all this, consulting and all this, and this and then other issues. Who's going to pay for all that? I mean, we already have, the treasurer's office isn't the only financial institution up there either. It's actually the smallest of the three. We got Office of Financial Management that oversees the whole budget processes. We got the Department of Revenue that's overseeing the revenue. So the treasurer's office,
and yet
is
nothing has come out of it, right? I mean, we don't even know.
Well, I'm not sure
what
that
amount
that's
of debt we don't know what amount of debt. No one in the state knows what amount of debt we should be targeting or achieving. And he tries to muddy the waters here. Remember, there's a clear distinction here. Dwayne's promised to stay out of politics. He's promised to not weigh in on these key issues of our state. And that's okay. I respect that position. He's been consistent since day one. But you can't provide information. It sounds good, but what does that mean? There's no distinction there about how do you provide information that actually isn't taking a guidance position or an angle that absolutely commits to financial professionalism. And I'm not trying to hide behind that, and I'm not trying to muddy the waters about what creating transparency is. You either provide it, I have the skills and the experience to provide the analysis that's actionable. Whether they act on it or not is going to be up their thing. But I am held accountable by the people, and you're elected to this office. They've made it a separate office in this state for a reason, to give the people a chief financial officer that has a voice and has a perspective to share. And we deserve it as taxpayers, because let's face it, all the bureaucracy we already have isn't achieving results, and we need to do better to turn around this underperforming state government. And that is a definite differentiator. Action with advocacy to represent taxpayers. Dwayne has been consistent. Like I said, he will stay out of the conversation and let others have it. But if not the treasurer, who on these sort of discussions?
I think if Mike had any involvement in government, he would look at it in a little bit different perspective. When you are in the finance industry,
Other than being a consumer,
Okay,
a taxpayer,
let's let-
and contributing in other ways?
when you're in the financial sector, it's a lot easier to look at any kind of proposal that comes down the way and say, this makes financial sense.
Dwayne, you haven't been in private industry for 2 decades.
Michael, let's let Dwayne say what he was.
Well, I think the instructions were clear that you wanted interjections and that.
Oh, sure,
So,
but let's
okay.
give him a chance.
It's a lot easier to say this is a plan that makes financial sense, and here's the reason why. This is why this is the best way for us to go. I'm advocating that we take this approach at Microsoft or at investment, whatever it is. I'm advocating that we do this, and everybody would be able to see how that lines up with the company objective, which is basically make a profit. As it is in most private businesses, it's easier. We all know in government the objectives of what government is there for, delivering services. It's not profit. It's not a profit generating business. The criteria is entirely different. You got a legislature up there with hundreds of people on it that are looking at things from a lot broader spectrum of what they think should come out of that. And so when you say, well, I'm going to be delivering these type of solutions with the advocacy of what makes the best sense for the taxpayer, I'm wondering how one individual can do that, because it's hard enough for a whole deliberative body to do that as a whole, of people coming at it from entirely different political persuasions and objectives.
That's excellent.
Okay, go ahead.
For someone that hasn't been in the industry for 2 decades, if anyone thinks that a $70 billion investment company has one way of doing it, or thinks they only look at it one way, has never sat in the chair. I'm currently part of a $950 billion organization. Sun Life bought Bentel Kennedy last year. The complexity of the analysis, and to answer Dwayne and give him an answer, it's called scenarios. That's what you run. Your business, I bet, runs scenarios, a budget, a high side, a budget, a low side budget, and that's what you do. And then you provide why one is better, why one is worse, why one is more likely, why one is less likely. And that's the type of stuff that is analysis. It's not that hard. But what is hard is it takes skills and experience, and I've been through that type of skills and experience, that rigor of expectation, to get it down to one page, to get it down to bite-sized consumable piece for clients that need discerning information that's respectful, and that's what is missing. You don't need another transparent report of 300 pages. That's not effective. It's not helping our state get better, and that's the difference. And I understand why he's never had that exposure, and I get it. I didn't have it until I worked for these clients and at these size companies. But it is real, and it's very complex, and it has many stakeholders. My stakeholders are big state pension plans with hundreds of thousands of consumers and pension holders at the end of it. I get the complexity of the public dollar and the importance for which those pension holders are relying on that money.
Let's back up. We alluded earlier to the outgoing treasurer had advocated for state income tax. Really quick, would you support a state income tax?
No, state income tax would be bad for our state. It's a major competitive advantage in us growing as a state and developing as a state. So,
Dwayne?
Well, and personally, I'm opposed to state income tax. I think that that's one of the reasons why our state has prospered is we allow people to come here and not be subject to that type of thing is one of the is advantageous to. And personally, I'm opposed to it. Yeah.
but he won't use the office to fight against it.
Would you?
Yes, I think it's appropriate to, again, to underwrite the options that the legislature considers. So if they do come at it with a state income tax, I have to be a part of helping them understand the pros and cons. But my personal position and my position of my analysis will obviously highlight an option, which is my preferred option, which is no state income tax. And here's the advantages of not having a state income tax.
here's a question that I'm pretty sure you guys haven't gotten yet. And I wouldn't assume that you guys are going to do what I'm about to ask, but, and I'll ask this individually, and I'll go to you, Michael, first. Are you smart enough to cook the books and get away with it?
There's nothing that would be important enough to try to do that.
No, I get that.
No.
This is a different question. Are you smart enough to do it?
Oh, I at what scale? I guess you got to understand. Of course, I think anybody is capable, and that's why you need to be so vigilant. I haven't been successful as a chief financial officer because I don't have good securities, good controls, and I don't want this to be a point of differentiation because I think Dwayne's obviously served on a local county jurisdiction basis, and most accountants, if we can agree on anything, segregation of duties are critical, and the integrity of the people you hire is paramount to achieving controls. And
Well, yeah,
so
but
I
everybody
am-
says that, but still, you will find places in private industry and in public industry where people have cooked the books.
Absolutely, and there's been
So-
a serious breakdown in personal integrity, probably in internal controls and weaknesses in the system. And what is a difference is I've had the experience of setting up control environments for billions of dollars.
No,
And-
I get that, but please appreciate the actual question. The question is, are you smart enough to do it? So in other words, do you have the intellectual capability of knowing, because you know how to
Yeah.
set up the various safeguards,
I
do
think
you have
it-
the intellectual ability to be able to break that down? And which to me speaks to the
Yeah.
idea that people go out there and hire hackers all the
Yeah,
time.
that's right.
Check their system. So would you be, I'm not saying you are,
Yeah.
would do it, but would you be smart enough to be able to get in there and screw around with it and not get caught?
I think yes, but everybody has that capability. That's in
I don't, but then,
in your own company.
no, absolutely not.
I think
I'm
you're
not
under-
smart enough.
I think as a
I'm
control,
admitting I'm not smart
as a
enough.
finance professional, I don't think we would agree with that. I think,
Okay.
and because I've been vigilant, and the case studies we all study show that fraud and acts like it come from all different parts of companies.
I get
And so no, I don't rest comfortably saying that I believe everybody has the capability, and I defend the system accordingly.
that. Okay.
See, although we're in the news part, they don't let us
Yeah.
anywhere
Oh,
near the
yeah,
money.
no,
so-
listen to this. You can create an invoice for a firm that may not be properly validated and be receiving money. I mean, the fact of where you sit in an organization just gives a different perspective on how you get money out of a
So
firm.
take
So-
notes on that.
So, yeah.
Are you?
Hey, I'm gonna keep an eye on you.
Yeah,
that $8 that I bought candy
That's-
for the newsroom?
that's funny.
It was $7. No, but you see, we have to provide receipts for that.
Hey, we got this
Yeah, but
stuff
what?
done.
How does the receipt get created? That's right.
I got a receipt. Are you smart enough to cook the books and get away with it?
For a number of years, I was a state auditor, and yes, absolutely, I could because I've discovered fraud. I've seen how it's been done. Numerous times I was one that discovered fraud cases, and had people. So to answer to your question directly is
Right.
absolutely. By the time you would find out if I decided to go that way, that I took the money, I'd be knee deep in the water somewhere, enjoying myself down in the Caribbean.
Oh, as opposed to sleeping with the fishes.
Yes.
Okay, that's a different thing.
You wouldn't be buying candy in the Caribbean.
No, it's
Okay.
Jimmy Buffett song, knee deep in the water.
Right, that was a mafia song. That was sleeping with the fishes.
Yeah.
Okay, so really that question was to sort of get at having enough knowledge to, understand how people do break into the systems and
Does-
being able to catch
We've
them.
all experienced it,
Yeah.
and it's from it's from outside and inside
Yeah.
firms, and no firm is immune.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else? Yeah, we'll move along then. Give us your final pitch, why voters should support you, and mention any notable endorsements you wish to bring up. Start with Dwayne.
Okay, I obviously think that I've been, like I've mentioned in editorial boards before, I think that the county treasurer's position is like is like the farm team for the majors here. I think it's a good training ground for. It's served most of our former state treasurers have come from county treasurer stock because they understand the role of government. They also have a deep appreciation for a lot of the other things that's unique to government that's very important to the taxpayers. Open public meetings, public records request, the people's right to know. When I talk about transparency of financial records, I know what that means. That's just not buzzwords. That means that we need to become, and I think that one of the most important things that could be done with the Treasurer's Office is to get more information out there and as transparent as possible so that taxpayers can get a hold of that and decipher that as they see fit in the future. That's an important part of the role of the Treasurer's Office. I really strongly believe that the treasurer ought to stay out of politics as much as possible. That doesn't mean that, by far doesn't mean that I think that you're taking it easy, because the role of trying to keep the books as concise as possible, make sure that the shell games that the taxpayers really believe are going on, and I think to some extent have been going on in Olympia, are exposed and made aware of. All that kind of work is a job all in itself. There's a lot of work to be done in that regard, and I think that and a couple other things that the county experience has given me is dealing with a bargaining unit. We're dealing with unions here. Benton County has, I can't even remember what our total count of bargaining units is. We have 2 right in the courthouse, and going into negotiations with the union is a big job every year, and I've had 14 years of experience of doing that and been able to keep good relations with the bargaining unit at the same time, striking the best deal I think possible for the county taxpayers. So I think that my background in the treasury management, I am a public treasurer now, and I think that it will serve me well in Olympia. I've been able to, I've mentioned it, but I'll just repeat it. I've been able to get endorsement of like Dan Evans and Sam Reed and Kim Wyman and others at the state level. I think I'm up to about 15 senators, and that includes Sharon Nelson, the leader of the opposition in the Senate, Democrat, and Mark Schuessler, the leader of the Republicans. Of the 15 senators and about 19 representatives I've got currently endorsing me, the thing that is most important is that just like this county treasurer support I've got, it's really bipartisan. They're just not a token person from the other political party. I've got representation from both sides because I have a good history of getting back there and trying to find that accord to get things moving. Because we have enough. We do have enough ideas in Olympia right now. Look at how many bills are dropped every single year. It's literally in the thousands. To get Olympia moving is what we need more than anything else, is bipartisan support to our stuff and start getting things out the door. The political rhetoric has got to a point where we've never seen it before, and that's what needs to stop. And the treasurer just weighing in and into that mix is something that I don't think serves the taxpayers of as citizens of the state well at all.
All right, thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I'm sure every organisation, sales teams would love to not have the chief financial officer involved, and that's the clear choice. So our campaign's finance professional, not another professional politician or bureaucrat. He's clever at muddying the waters about transparency, but look at the record. Benton County's financial statements are 207 pages long. The budget's close to 600 pages long. That's not useful to taxpayers. It's not actionable. So there's 3 things I'm going to bring to this office. The right experience, dealing in billions of dollars, serving clients of the sophistication and magnitude that mirrors the state. Pension plans of $100 billion. That is where we can provide phenomenal returns, low risk, still achieve the liquidity, and yet put more money back so that the legislature, who needs to be doing a better job, has more money to make better decisions and hopefully get better results, but also has a chief financial officer who will, beyond the administration role of the duty, which I covered, in pensions, debt, and managing the cash, which I will do at or far exceed what has been done today and what my opponent plans to do. But beyond that, there is capacity. I work extremely hard in private business, and I will continue to work very hard. So beyond the right experience is the innovation I will bring. That is the cost perspective that I shared about the third-party advisors and the consultants, using my incentive to do a better job versus the incentive of status quo, which is what my opponent's promising and what the past decades have yielded, and the innovation in the office. What is produced by this office? Go look at what produced by the State Treasurer's Office. 30-page debt affordability study. Page 25 will tell you that we're the 6th highest debt per person in the country. It's not useful to legislators or taxpayers. And then finally, it's strategic advice. Strategic advice to the legislature, to the governor, to the community that they can act on and that they can consider as part of their deliberations, as part of their negotiations, because it will be delivered at the time they're considering it. And some of Mike Murphy's best work was when he did weigh in, when he killed the monorail project in Seattle, when he did weigh in, and when McIntyre has done the same on occasions. Too often, though, the feedback I get from all the legislators that are endorsing me is it comes too late. It comes months after the fact, and not when we need it as we're considering projects and proposals. We don't understand the full financial ramifications of decisions, and that will be a valued voice in Olympia. It is not partisan to provide great financial advice. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for your time. My endorsers include Rob McKenna, Senator Andy Hill, Joe Fain, Terry Hickle, Alan Martin, former Assistant State Treasurer, has been a great mentor through this. He ran the debt portfolio for 8 years in the State Treasurer's Office. Brian Sontag, the former auditor, has endorsed, and I'm proud to have that. My endorsements are going to keep on rolling. We're not rolling them all out right now, but I'm proud of the leadership on both sides of the House. But the ones I'm getting are the ones that want someone to advise. The ones that I'm not getting are the ones that would much rather a treasurer sit passively in their office and administer the books. I will do that, but I will do more, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah.
No endorsement from Bill and Melinda?
Keep that one to myself.